HARK, we are here. It is time for yet another episode of Regroup Phase. We got a lot to cover this week. There are, I think, a total of 24, 25 card previews to look at this week. Lots of fun stuff. We have the entirety of the starter decks known, so we're going to go over those previews, and we'll go over the contents of the starters themselves, how many copies of each card are in each deck, so on and so forth. And we also have a lot of creator and FFG social previews, so there's lots of cool things to talk about today. Let's get right to it. Our first preview of the week comes by way of the Unlimited FFG social accounts, link in the description below. This is an art we've seen, a card I was very excited for until I saw it. And while it does bring a not a completely new, but reinforces a strategy that hasn't really been seen in the game as much since the game launched, it doesn't do much for what I wanted it to do for. So without any further ado, we have here Satine Kryze, a 4-cost Vigilance Heroism ground unit. She's committed to peace. 0 power, 6 health, Mandalorian officials. Each unit, including enemy units, gains action, exhaust this unit, discard cards from an opponent's deck equal to half of this unit's remaining HP rounded up. This is a legendary, number 47 out of 257 in TWI. Satine Kryze is here to mill your deck. It's a main strategy for some decks, a sub strategy for other decks, and the entire point of this card is to plop it on the board, exhaust your units, discard cards off the top of your opponent's deck. Reminder, your opponent can do this to you as well, and just try to force the damage to your opponent's base by clearing out all the cards from their decks. And if you can, quote unquote, fatigue them out that way, there's really not much left that they can do to be able to win the game from there on out. She comes down as a 6, so she's not immediately susceptible to things like force, choke, or takedown. She can still be waylaid. She can be exhausted to prevent herself from using this effect, but the fact that this applies to any unit that's on the board, it's really not going to do too much in terms of that. A quick clarification, the action is related to the unit that is exhausting's HP, not necessarily Satine's HP. So if Satine exhausted herself, you would discard 3 cards off the top of your opponent's deck, because that's half of her health. But if you had something else that had, say, 5, you would exhaust that, check the 5, half of that is 2.5, rounding up, you go to 3, you discard 3 cards from your opponent's deck. There's another card that pairs with this very well. It's also a Mandalorian. It also does nothing for Mandalorian strategies, but does help this mill strategy because it gives you a sentinel and a bigger butt to be able to do things with. Double vigilance, double blue, whatever you want to call it, is going to be very good at being able to utilize this. I think that Chirrut being able to pump his health and also stay on the board is going to be a fairly interesting strategy for this, but also Rey being able to give some of these units experience tokens to increase their butt, to increase the amount of cards they discard, and also her own restore, being able to make sure that you can heal stuff off your base to survive, is going to be an interesting strategy for Satine. But the biggest problem with this is that Satine is an enabler. If you don't have your Satine, you're not really going to be milling, so you have to hope on your other strategy for the game, attacking your opponent's base, controlling your opponent's units, are going to win you the game, at least until you can get this, or find a different way to win the game. Next up, we have a creator preview from Rolling Dice and Taking Names. Link in the description below to their preview. This is the unit version of a leader we've seen before. We are looking at Padme Amidala, Pursuing Peace, 2-cost, Cunning Heroism ground units, 1 power, 4 health, Naboo Republic official traits, coordinate on attack, give an enemy unit -3/-0 for this phase. An uncommon, number 192 out of 257 in TWI. The one thing I'm thankful for about this card is that it specifically says an enemy unit, not a unit you're attacking. This card's not good. There's nothing else I can say other than this is just not a good card. I was hoping that with how poor the Padme leader was, that the Padme unit would be much better, and I actually couldn't tell you which one's worse. That's all I can say. I don't want to be super negative about this. The coordinate effect is okay. It can allow you to clear out your opponent's units or prevent your opponent from being able to do a bunch of damage to your base, but Jedha City exists, doesn't see any play for the very reason that this effect is just not as effective as people want it to be. Disarm is the same thing. I was actually pretty high on Disarm. Disarm is nowhere. You proved the point by not running these effects. This effect is not good. It's not going to be run. Next up, we have a creator preview from Twin Sunz. Link in the description to their YouTube video for this specific card. This is the card that supports Satine that I was talking about earlier. We have Duchess's Champion. This is a 4-cost double vigilance ground unit, 1 power, 8 health, Mandalorian trait, While an opponent controls 3 or more units, this unit gains Sentinel. This is an uncommon, number 54 out of 257 in TWI. Fun fact, this is basically reverse coordinate. Instead of you controlling 3 or more units, your opponent has to control 3 or more units. There is some viability to that. Your opponent might be running a bunch of battle droids, and they will have to either clear them off the board or attack into this in order to be able to do that. This is not doing a lot of damage back because it only has 1 power, but for 4 cost, it has 8 health. That is huge, which does support Satine, because that means that you can drop this on 4, drop Satine on 5, even though they're the same resources, and have Duchess's Champion on your next action immediately rip 4 cards off the top of your opponent's base. Add in things that give you extra health, add in things that give you a little bit of protection with shields. You can throw Protectors down, Devotion down for the Restore. You can throw down Resilience. You can throw down Mandalorian Armor. You can throw down Entrenched. Building up the health on your units to be able to utilize that discard effect, that mill effect, with Satine means that you're going to be discarding a lot of cards off the top of your opponent's deck with units like Duchess's Champion. And because Duchess's Champion is not unique, you can run more than one of these on the board, and your opponent has to figure out how to deal with these without losing too much of their own tempo to be going at your base. So mill is going to be one of those strategies that require you to kind of burst through your opponent's deck as quickly as possible while also controlling your opponent's board and not dying. But with things like Sentinel on this, if your opponent has a bunch of units, or Restore in general with either your leader or other units that you can attach upgrades to, there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be very interesting for this strategy. I don't know how good it's going to do, but I'll be very interested to see how it performs for people who do enjoy the style of mill. Next up, our first leader of the week. Link to this preview in the description below from Unlimited FFG Socials. It's our first rare leader of this week, and it is a heroism leader. We are starting off with Yoda, Sensing Darkness, Vigilance, Heroism, Rare Leader, Force Jedi Republic traits. Action, exhaust this leader. If a unit left play this phase, draw a card, then put a card from your hand on the top or bottom of your deck. He flips as an epic action on 7 into a 4/9. This is a rare, number 004 out of 257. Yoda Sensing Darkness's unit side has the same things we know, 4/9 power health. Restore 2. When deployed, you may discard a card from your deck. If you do, defeat an enemy non-leader unit that costs the same as or less than the discarded unit. I will say, right off the bat, discard a card from your deck is terrible formatting. I don't know why they couldn't just say the top card of your deck. I really don't know what situation would come into play where discarding a card from your deck and discarding the top card of your deck, differentiating the templating there, means anything. Because they've already clarified that discarding a card from your deck is always considered the top card. Beyond that, Yoda's idea is you use his front side when you lose units to filter your deck so that you can get the cards you need on your hand, send away the cards you don't need, and then on your flip turn, prepare the top card of your deck to be able to utilize his when deployed effect to kill whatever unit you're looking to kill off the board based upon already knowing what the top card of your deck is. You're My Only Hope is probably going to see a lot of play in Yoda because you can already fix the deck, the top of the deck, and to be whatever it is you want, especially if it's just a card that's from your hand, or hope that the next card up, if you bury the card from the top card of your deck, ends up being something that would be worthwhile with You're My Only Hope. Yoda is a great leader. He's going to see a lot of play. The style of this leader is not specifically for me, so it's not something that I personally am going to play. But I know that there are going to be people out there that are going to love this. They're going to try to break it. More power to them. Yoda is a good leader, just not one specifically for me. Next up, the meme lords have arrived. It's our next double single aspect legendary. As we said, the meme lords have arrived. Link to this preview from Unlimited FFG Socials in the description below. We have Unlimited Power, a 6-cost double aggression force event. Deal 4 damage to a unit, deal 3 damage to a second unit, deal 2 damage to a third unit, and deal 1 damage to a fourth unit. All damage is dealt simultaneously. This is a legendary, number 156 out of 257 in TWI. Obviously, Unlimited Power, this is an app, as Palpatine is preparing to try to kill Mace. I don't technically think Mace dies here, but he'll die with the Kersplat on the ground being flung out. Who knows, though? We haven't really, there's no confirmation of the kill, so Mace Windu could be floating around there somewhere. This is a very interesting event because it does allow you to divvy up damage based upon stuff. but you do really need 4 units on your opponent's side of the board in order for this to be super effective. I think this is a good card. I don't necessarily know that this is going to be a highly playable card. There are other cards that have come into the past that people have immediately thought were really good. Force Lightning, Given to Your Anger, stuff like that, but haven't ended up seeing play because their uses are too niche. I still haven't seen anybody use Given to Your Anger, and Force Lightning is pretty much mostly relegated to sideboards, or if you know you're going to face a Crate Dragon or something, you really need to make sure it doesn't have the ability. Bada boom. Unlimited Power is going to be a fun card to use because you get to meme on your opponent. It is a 6 cost, so execute order 66, and blast your opponent's board to pieces. But remember, you do need to do damage to each of these units. So if there's only 1 unit on your opponent's side of the board and you have 3 units on yours, make sure your opponent's unit's the one that takes 4, and then don't kill any of your own stuff with this by divvying out the damage the way that it does. However, if there's only units on your opponent's side of the board and doesn't fill the full 4, that's fine, because that just means that you just deal damage to the 3 or 2 or whatever, and then you go on from there. So this is 10 total damage, if I remember correctly, which is pretty good, but it is split across 4 total units. So fun card, useful, we'll find out. Next up, coming by way of unlimited FFG socials, link in the description below, we have here a big chunk ground unit. Let's check it out. This is the ATTE Vanguard, an 8 cost heroism ground unit, 6 power, 9 health, Republic Vehicle Walker, restore 3, when defeated create 2 Clone Trooper tokens, an uncommon number 247 out of 257 in TWI. This is what we call, like in the business, like to call a limited bomb. Effectively going to be very useful in limited because you can drop it down. It does change the scape of the battlefield, and it gives you some benefits towards the end of its lifespan by creating 2 Clone Trooper tokens. This is a very good when defeated effect because it does bring 2 Clone Trooper tokens. The only change personally I would have liked to have seen is this being a when played and when defeated trigger. That way you can drop 2 clones with this and then 2 clones after this leaves play. But it has restore 3, so it's going to be restoring health off your base. It's got 6 power, so it's relevant. You're going to be able to take out opposing units. You're going to be able to push some extra damage to your opponent's base. And with 9 health, it's not as susceptible to being removed by attackers or damage as something that would have lesser health. I like this card a lot. This will probably be at least a 2 of in a Clone Trooper deck that I would want to build. The 8 cost does mean it is expensive, and it does mean that it might not necessarily see as much play because it is going to come into a portion of the game where that level of cost is not prohibitive, but you don't often necessarily see the games go that far unless you're fighting like hard control or something like that, right? I like this a lot. Really cool vehicle, very cool design. This is something that I've been really wanting to see, and we got it, and we're going to get more really cool heroism stuff that deals with Clone Trooper tokens, and I am excited. On Wednesday, October 9th, FFG put out the starter deck video where host Alicia had Ryan and Tyler, our rules czar and senior designer, play the starter decks, the Grievous and Ahsoka starter decks from Twilight of the Republic. Lots of interesting stuff here, lots of cool gameplay. Please go check out that video. It's linked in the description below. We're going to go over the cards here that are listed. We've got 15 cards plus the 2 deck lists themselves. I'm not going to preview the bases because they're just 30 health command bases, so you don't really need to know that other than they're 30 health command bases. So we're going to get right to it and preview some stuff with these at the end of this preview block. And we're going to start with Ahsoka's Padawan Lightsaber, a 1 cost heroism upgrade attached to a non-vehicle unit. When played, if attached unit is Ahsoka Tano, you may attack with a unit. This gives +2 power, no health, item weapon lightsaber. This is a starter card, so we're going to get 3 of these. 248 out of 257 in TWI. Ahsoka's lightsaber is really cool. It's just a basic 1 cost +2 upgrade, which is fairly good on its own. But if you attach this to Ahsoka, either her leader unit when she's on the board or regular unit after you play that, you get to attack with any unit that is eligible to attack on your side of the board, which is really good. It's not just specifically attack with Ahsoka, it's attack with any unit so long as this is attached to Ahsoka. That's going to give you a lot of really fun plays to buff up your Ahsoka. You can attack with her into one of your opponent's things or into your opponent's base, or you can set her up for another attack later and attack with one of your other things that's ready to go and get yourself a nice little 2-for-1, pumping your leader or units and then attacking with the other unit. I think it's a great card. It's probably going to see a lot of play, especially with Ahsoka decks specifically. And because it's heroism, whichever Ahsoka you choose to play, it is available for her to utilize. Next up, we have B1 Security Team. This is a 2-cost Cunning ground unit, 3 power, 1 health, Separatist droid trooper traits. It has Sentinel. This is a common, number 207 out of 257 in TWI. Obviously, this is designed to be able to beat your opponent's clone trooper tokens when they attack into this, so it's an even trade unit for units, or potentially give you other Sentinel options if you're not playing Grievous in the starter specifically. But the fact that this is just basically a 3-1 for 2 is still a decent turn 1, round 1 drop. That way you can get your Sentinel on the board and prepare your other things to do. It's going to take out almost anything it comes into contact with, unless you're going up against one of the more elusive 4 health units like R2-D2 or something like that. But it's a good Sentinel because it does stop that damage going to your base early game, and it's a cheap unit that gets you a little bit more synergy with your droids, with your Separatists, and your Sentinels. Our next card here is Dendup's Loyalist, a 2-cost aggression ground unit, 2 power, 3 health, French trooper traits, Overwhelm. This is a common number 158, I believe that is. This is a common number 159 out of 257 in TWI. We have here somebody who pops up, shoots a droid, and is able to keep moving. This is designed specifically so that the Ahsoka deck has options to be able to attack through the droids, keep your units on the board, and still deal some damage to your opponent's base. Ahsoka is definitely the I need to get as much damage onto my opponent's base type deck aggro as possible, while Grievous is a little bit more mid-rangey control to get those bigger units out later. This will help you knock out your opponent's droid tokens, and if you get attacked with Ahsoka's +1 coordinate ability, that gives you an extra damage to push through with that Overwhelm, which is pretty decent. Next up, we have an absolute banger of a Separatist villainy event. This is Droid Deployment, a 2-cost villainy supply event. Create 2 battle droid tokens. This is a common number 237 out of 257 in TWI. This card is nuts. It gives you that acceleration, much like some of your other stuff does. Droid deployment on 2, battle droid escort on 3, potentially dropping the battle droid legion on, I want to say it's like 5 or 5 or 4, and then getting the invisible handout on 8 to be able to drop those extra tokens. There are so many villainy applicators for droid tokens that there's never going to be a situation where you're not going to be able to at least do something to put exploit fodder on the board for yourself. Droid deployment also is just a really good round 1 play. Pay 2, get 2 droid tokens. You now have more presence than your opponent's basically going to be able to put off onto the board unless they drop 2 1 costs, and then you get some other stuff. Hashtag droid stay winning, because droid deployment is here. Next up, cheap and easy Droid Starfighter, 1-cost villainy space unit, 1 power, 2 health, Separatist droid vehicle fighter. It's got Saboteur. It's a common number 228 out of 257 in TWI. It's a basic unit. You can either use it to slam into one of your opponent's units to knock the shield off of them in space, if that's something you have to worry about, or just ping your opponent's base for 1 and utilize this as either exploit fodder later on in the game, or just keep pinging for 1 because your opponent's not really too motivated to clear this off the board. So dropping a couple of these in your deck to be able to get that one cost unit out, much like the TIE fighters were for villainy back in set 1. This does the same thing, but in a different way. Tiny bit more survivable with more health, but it does something more by being able to clear out those shields or bypass your opponent's Sentinels. So the Bright Hope can just eat it at this point. Here it is. The card I've been waiting for a month and a half now. We've got drop in a 4-cost heroism supply event. Create 2 clone trooper tokens, a common number 251 out of 257 in TWI. This is a 3 of in every clone trooper deck. It's heroism, goes in all of them. It creates 2 tokens for a 4-cost. The 4-cost opportunity here is not super great. You want your 4-cost events to be a little bit more effective than something like this, especially where I think for 6-cost, Rex can drop 2 of these at 2 tokens and also himself, putting out 8 total power and health on the board each stat, whereas drop-in only does 4 for 4, but that's not terrible. It does what it needs to do. It's an event that you can play. It's heroism, and it fits in all these decks. Like, there's only so much you can ask for from these types of things, but this does basically confirm that with Rex's ability as a unit, Rex's ability as a leader, and this, clone troopers are effectively 2 resources for 1/2/2. And while I don't necessarily agree with that specific design space for these types of things, I'm glad drop-in's here. I'm glad we get something that drops tokens to be able to do cool things. And, you know, I needed something, and it's here, and I'm excited. I am genuinely excited at this point. Next up, we have a command event here called Encouraging Leadership. 3-cost command learned event. Give each friendly unit +1/+1 for this phase. It's a common number 126, I believe, at a 257 in TWI. We've got Adiagali here with Oddball. That is a V19 turret in the background. I'm hoping we can get a space unit that's a V19. Please, 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 please. This is an interesting card because it gives you, for 3 costs, it gives 1 unit +1/+1. Or multiple units +1/+1, realistically, because it's each of your units, right? If you only have 1 unit on the board, this is a terrible card to play. If you have multiple units on the board, it just depends on how many units that are on the board when you're using this, if you're using it for offense or defense, and if your opponent can deal with something like this. Encouraging Leadership does take your clones out of Bloodsport range for the phase, but because this does fall off, your things will still die if they have enough damage at the end of the phase to knock out. But it does give you the option to be able to at least push in that extra damage where your opponent may not necessarily be able to deal with that. If you've got 6 units on the board and you play Encouraging Leadership, all of a sudden those 6 units are now 6 total power that your opponent has to be like, how do I deal with this? How do I deal with this? What do I do? And that's an interesting play. So a 2 of in a deck that wants to spread a bunch of units might be pretty good. But I think at best this might actually be sideboard tech. So that way in your games 2, and if worse comes to worse 3, you think you're going to be able to utilize these, you can sideboard them in and get you those extra damage points to push through to your opponent's base and defeat your opponent in gameplay. Next up, we have the ETA-2 Light Interceptor, a 5-cost heroism space unit, 3 power, 4 health, Republic vehicle and fighter traits, not Jedi, which is interesting. Restore 2. This is a common number 244 out of 257 in TWI. The best thing I can say about this is that this is going to be a card you do actually want to see in limited, draft and sealed. 3/4 in space is pretty good because you aren't seeing a lot of space units concentrated into your limited decks. And that Restore 2 is going to help you push you further along, especially when you have damage on your base. But in terms of Premier, I don't think this card sees any play at all. It's too expensive. It doesn't have as good stats as you would want it to. If it had 1 extra health and 1 less power, it might see some play in Rey, because Rey likes Restore, and Rey could put an experience token on this. But a 5-cost 3/4 in space is a very tough proposition, very tough value proposition for cards in this game. And I genuinely don't think this card's going to see too much play in constructed Premier events. Next up, we have Grievous's signature card, Grievous's Wheel Bike, a 4-cost ability upgrade. While playing this upgrade on General Grievous, it costs 2 less to play. Attached to a non-vehicle unit, the attached unit gains Overwhelm. You get +3/+3 as a starter upgrade, number 236 out of 257 in TWI. Grievous's Wheel Bike is a very interesting design. A 4-cost 3/3, which gives you Overwhelm, is actually pretty good overall stats. You're paying 1 additional resource to be able to get that Overwhelm, which could be very relevant on things as long as you're not equipping it to a vehicle. However, equipping it to Grievous himself brings this as a 2-cost 3/3 with Overwhelm. And whether it's the incredibly efficient and cheap 3-cost Grievous unit, which puts that whole package at 5 cost for a 7/7 with Overwhelm, that's nuts. Or the Leader, which flips on 6, if I remember correctly, bringing that to effectively an 8-cost, quote unquote, 7/11, if I remember correctly. I believe his stats are 4/8. Grievous's Wheel Bike will do a lot of work if you're playing Grievous in your deck. Otherwise, put it on something that's going to be able to do a bunch of damage and Overwhelm into your opponent's units. And Grievous's Bike will actually put some work out for you. It'll be interesting to see if this ends up becoming utilized often in combination with the unit, because it is just ability. So being able, like I said, the package of 5 cost for Grievous and the Bike is kind of nuts. Overall, plus whatever lightsabers if you're trying to throw those onto him and do that strategy. We'll have to see how this works in the future. It is an interesting design space and an interesting build around type effect, but how good that's going to be is yet to be seen. We've seen the art for this card on a mat. Now we have the actual card. This is In Pursuit, a 0-cost cunning tactic event. Exhaust a friendly unit. If you do, exhaust an enemy unit. This is a common number 221 out of 257 in TWI. This is obviously not going to be as good as something like No Good to Be Dead, where that can exhaust something for up to 2 turns. But the fact that you can exhaust one of your token units, which you may not necessarily need to worry about, while also exhausting one of your opponent's units, you have a lot of really good options for 0 cost, basically just the card from your hand and exhausting one of your units to be able to exhaust an enemy unit. And I think that's a pretty decent play there. I don't know if this is going to see too much play in the premier competitive circuit, but it does present options available for people to utilize exhaust in packages where they have extra units that aren't going to be doing much in the specific turn, because you can in pursuit exhaust your opponent's most expensive unit, then exploit the thing that you in pursuited to pay for the cost of the actual ability to then throw something else out and put your opponent on the back foot, which that's kind of what exploit is trying to do. Next up, we have Independent Senator, a 1-cost cunning ground units, 0 power, 4 health, separatist official. Action for 2 resources and exhausting this unit. You could exhaust an opposing unit, or any unit technically, with 4 or less power. This is an uncommon number 206 out of 257 in TWI. Ideally, you're using an Independent Senator to try to keep something down that has a relevant on attack, or is a unit that gets something based upon being ready as opposed to being exhausted, or just trying to slow your opponent's units down that have 4 power or less, to be able to make sure that you can continue getting your stuff out and not lose your things that either have Sentinel or other units that are on the board that are dealing extra damage. There's some interesting case uses for this. I don't think this is going to see a ton of play, but it is useful in the starter deck when a lot of the opposing units that you're facing are 4 power or less outside of things like Anakin. We'll see how useful this is in the future. Next card is Merciless Contest. This is a 3-cost villainy tactic event. Each player chooses a non-leader unit they control. Defeat those units. This is a common number 238 out of 257 in TWI. You've got the art here of Ventress versus Savage versus Dooku. This is a really good card. It's not as good as Power of the Dark Side because you have to defeat one of your own units, but you choose the unit. It doesn't say if you do defeat it, defeat your opponent's units. And this is actually a pretty big banger in Twin Suns. You only get 1 copy of this, but you can force everybody to defeat a unit. And this is a strategy that sees a lot of play in Match of the Gathering, where everybody has to sacrifice something, which is defeating in our game. But ultimately, you pick a unit, your weakest unit, and then you hope your opposing players pick a unit that's very relevant for you to be able to defeat, or if it's their only unit on the board that's not a leader, boom, that goes away. So you can chip down on your opponent's board state with these merciless contests, utilizing your own battle droids to pull off your side of the board, and then your opponent has to pick something that, you know, they may not necessarily want to defeat or don't have the space to be able to defeat if it's the only unit they have. It doesn't take down leaders, thankfully. I'm super happy that that clause was placed on this card, because otherwise I think this would just be way too strong. As it is, I already don't like it because there's almost no cost for this, because it's a do what you can thing. So as far as I'm concerned, you can play this with no units on the board and your opponent still has to choose a unit to defeat. If you have nothing, then you just continue playing the card, because it doesn't have the clause of if you do something, your opponents do something. So Merciless Contest, it's going to be an all-time control card, just like Power of the Dark Side is, and it's a villainy card, so villainy control stays winning, and we just have to deal with it. Next up, we've got Republic Arc 170. This is a 3-cost command space unit. 3 power, 4 health, Republic Vehicle Fighter. It's a common number 111 out of 257 in TWI. I was actually just talking about this the day of recording this video, that I was hoping we were going to see a non-unique Arc 170, and here it is. Unfortunately, it's not heroism, so it doesn't get the bonuses that heroism would. So it's not getting raid from Red 3. It's not getting the extra health from Admiral Yularen, but it is a Republic fight space unit that is going to put some work out. It's 3 cost, 3/4. Doesn't come into play ready like the Falcon does, but it also doesn't bounce itself back. It's going to be decent in decks that need the fighters in space, as long as you're playing command. And I'm happy to see the Arc 170 in the game. Just need the V19 Torrent, and we need Acclimators, both non-unique, so I can play as many of them as I possibly can in a deck. That would make me super happy. But 3 cost, 3/4, it's pretty decent for a space unit. Speaking of command units, we have here Subjugating Starfighter. This is a 4-cost command space unit, 3 power, 3 health, Separatist Vehicle Fighter traits. It has the ambush keyword, and when played, if you have the initiative, create a battle droid token. This is a common number 112 out of 257 in TWI. Battle droid enabler, as long as you have the initiative, which you can definitely manage. It ambushes into things, so it can help you clear out a troublesome 3 health space unit or less, or put some damage into one of your opponent's space units that you need to put damage into, while also still giving you some value with the battle droid token. Honest, 4 cost is probably the only downside I see to this, but even still, a 4 cost 3/3 ambush, play a token if you have initiative, is pretty good, and it's probably going to see some level of play in those Separatist decks that are running Command. Our last card preview from the starter deck stream, super easy and simple card. It is the Super Battle Droid, a 3-cost villainy ground unit, 4 power, 3 health, Separatist Droid Trooper, a common. I believe that is 230 out of 257 in TWI. 3-cost, 4/3, basic, just drop your Separatist Droid Trooper down, blast, blast, blast afterwards, and go ham, right? This is kind of the not the counter, but the counterpart to those Phase 1 and Phase 2 clone troopers, specifically the Phase 1. I actually wouldn't be surprised if we saw a 4-cost Super Battle Droid that did something with a keyword like the Phase 1 and Phase 2 do for regular clone troopers. So decent card, 3-cost, 4/3, throw it out there, do some damage when it's down to its last life, last health. If your opponent doesn't defeat it outright, exploit it to get in your bigger units and go ham, because that's what Super Battle Droids do. Next up, we have a creator preview from Rim CCG, link in the description below to their video. We have here a big chunk space cruiser. It's a type of capital ship that I'm very excited to see. We are taking a look at Republic Defense Carrier, 11-cost command heroism space unit, 6 power, 7 health, Republic vehicle capital ship. This unit costs 1 less to play for each unit controlled by the opponent who controls the most units. It is a Sentinel. It's number 98 out of 257 and uncommon in TWI. Republic Defense Cruiser is a interesting ship. It's an Acclamator class Star Destroyer, one of my favorites. Featured very heavily in the end of Attack of the Clones and is part of the 2003 Star Wars The Clone Wars animated series. I have to think about how to describe that specifically. The fact that there's 2 series named The Clone Wars is very, very, very much an issue. An 11-cost 6/7 is terrible in space, pretty much no matter how you cut it. However, if you are on the back foot and you don't have enough units on the board to be able to protect yourself, especially in space, if your opponent has more units than you, and this thing will get reduced by the amount of units your opponent controls. So it's not the difference. This unit costs 1 less to play for each unit controlled by the opponent who controls the most units. So it could literally be you've got 6 units on the board and they've got 7, but because they have 7, this thing is now reduced by 7. And that's really cool because that means this could come down for a 4. Obviously, people would probably wish this is a ground unit because a lot of the big unit swarm strategies are on the ground. But with stuff like the Tarkin deck out there, you can see potentially a space swarm, and this does really help kind of counter that a little bit. Or if somebody has shifted their game into space, you can get a couple off in order to be able to play this. I would say at least 4 is probably a good opportunity to be able to play the Republic Defense Carrier. 7 cost, 6/7 with Sentinel, pretty decent in space. Obviously, there's stuff like the Avenger, the Devastator that's just flat out better, but this can at least come down for a lot less, especially if your opponent wipes your board and you're just like, I need a unit. If your opponent has 11 units on the board, has used like Invasion of Christophsis and wiped out your board, you can bring this down for free so long as they have 11 units on the board. Not likely, and by that point, you're probably dead anyway, but at least you could say, hey, I played a cool carrier for 0. And Acclamator's here. I just need a V19 torrent, and we're good to go, and I'm pretty happy. Our second leader of the week is a rare leader. This comes by way of the Unlimited FFG Socials, and this leader, personally, has sparked a lot of internal strife about the way that I feel about this game as a whole. So we're going to go over the leader. I'll talk about what I mean, and then y'all can take from that what you will afterwards. We have here Prey Vizsla, Pursuing the Throne, a aggression, villainy, Mandalorian trooper traded leader. Action, 1 resource and exhaust the leader. Deal damage to a unit equal to the number of cards you've drawn this phase. Epic action, for 5 resources, he flips into a 4/6, which is really good. He's a rare, number 010, 10 out of 257. On his flip side, he's a 5-cost 4/6 Mandalorian trooper. While you have 3 or more cards in your hand, this unit gains Saboteur. While you have 6 or more cards in your hand, this unit gets +2/+0. Prey Vizsla, ignoring Prey Vizsla, the name itself. This is a great leader. Drawing cards is good. You are able to deal damage based upon drawing cards, and aggression is a thing that is able to draw cards a lot. This might actually be one of the instances where I Am Your Father ends up being a really good card because you either deal for 4, deal 3 damage, draw 3 cards, or for 3, just deal 7 damage, and your opponent has to deal with something thereon regardless of what happens. Because this, for some reason, still requires you to spend a resource, even though you need to spend resources to draw cards. And then on the flip side, you have the ability, once you have a chunk of cards in your hand, to gain Saboteur or get the +2/+0. I think the +2/+0 is kind of a pipe dream. You have to really make sure you're either saving your cards or drawing a ton of cards or having a draw engine that allows you to be able to do that. But having 3 or more cards in your hand on your flip turn is pretty common. So getting that Saboteur to be able to bypass your opponent's Sentinels and push that damage directly into your opponent's base is pretty good. Bosk stats, very good. A 4/6 for 5, that's very good. To me personally, if this didn't have the name Vizsla and Mandalorian, it would be the exact same card. Nothing about this design specifically to me represents Vizsla as a character in Star Wars Unlimited. And this is one of the issues that I'm kind of having with some of the design of the game, whereas it doesn't necessarily feel like the text that's on the card matches the characters that you're playing, especially when some decks that you see out there are just a pile of good cards and have no thematic connection to each other whatsoever. And that's realistically because the way the game is designed is the good cards are always going to be good independently, and the thematic cards are only good together, and they have to be balanced in such a way that they're not overpowered if used separately. Vizsla, I have a couple of ideas bouncing in my head. Obviously a good target for the Darksaber. You don't even have to run command in order to be able to put the Darksaber on Vizsla himself. Turning him into an 8/9, I think, is what the stats would end up being with the Darksaber, would be pretty good. You could run this aggression vigilance in order to be able to get those extra Mandalorians out there. The Super Commandos, Clan Saxon, Gauntlet, the Follower of the Way, and Fen Rao. But this deck is not designed around being a Mandalorian deck. This is a deck designed around using the best cards to draw you cards and put pressure on your opponent's side. Being able to flip on 5 into a 4/6 is fantastic. You put that pressure on your opponent's base to be able to throw that 4 damage onto them, or more if you upgrade it. There's a lot of different strategies that end up working very well with Vizsla, but none of them are going to be good Mandalorian strategies. And that's the thing that I've kind of learned about set 2 is that Mandalorian strategy just isn't good in set 2. There's no real great representation outside of Sabine running the Darksaber, which is thematic, but Sabine's not running the Darksaber to run a Mandalorian strategy. It's just the best thing to do on 4. Flip, Darksaber, wreck your opponent's face, and throw effectively 8 damage at their base in a single swing on 4. There are very few things that can do that in a 2-card combo. I am worried overall that the good cards design is going to push out the thematic design of the game, and I think that might be one of the things that will end up pushing casual players out of Star Wars Unlimited, because you come here to play a Star Wars game, and oftentimes I myself am feeling like I'm not playing a Star Wars game. I'm playing a game of colored cards that have shapes and numbers that do better things irrespective of what they actually represent within the Star Wars universe. I understand that that's probably a controversial opinion. There's not a lot of people that would necessarily agree with me, but this specific leader does not spark Mandalorian in me. It sparks, hey, drawing cards is good, which is something I've talked about since set 1. Drawing cards is good. This augments giving you bonuses based upon drawing said cards. Vizsla is not a bad leader. He's a great leader. I might even end up playing him. I'm definitely going to chase down his showcase because he's a Mandalorian leader, but he's not a Mandalorian deck. And that's kind of the problem. Next up, we have a preview from SWU Harvest. Link in the description below to their video. This is, I believe, our first aspect list rare card, and that's kind of interesting. We have here Brain Invaders. This is a 4-cost, no aspect ground unit, 2 power, 4 health, fringe trait. Each leader loses all abilities except for epic actions and cannot gain abilities. This is a rare number 255 out of 257 in TWI. A 4-cost 2/4, it's trash. You're wrong. Yes, it is susceptible to all levels of removal. It can be taken down, it can be force choked, it can be open fired, it can be waylaid. There's all kinds of other things. But it demands an answer effectively the turn it comes in. Otherwise, your opponent's leader is going to be nullified. Pretty much every single leader in the game except for 2 are very hurt by not having either side of their leader abilities. Palpatine flip, too bad, you don't get a unit. All of Jabba's bounty shenanigans, all of Bosk's shenanigans. The 2 leaders that aren't really affected by this too much are Kylo Ren's flip, because it means that he's just a 5/4 with no text, right? So this is actually pretty good in Kylo Ren decks as a whole. Also, Boba Fett, because Boba Fett could attack into this, clear it off the board, and still restore its 2 resources because it has completed an attack, and the attack has been completed after this has been defeated and pulled off the board. Otherwise, you're restricting Han 2 R2's ability to bring out things cheaper. You're restricting Rey's ability to drop experience tokens. You eliminate her restore. You eliminate literally certain characters' abilities to even play their own cards, like Hera, who no longer has the ability to reduce the aspect penalty of her Spectre cards. So that's troublesome. There's a lot of really fun things that this can really work against and push the game in your favor in terms of just negating what your opponent's leader, especially if it's their central strategy, can do. No drawing cards for Cassian, no extra attacks for Leia, no dropping extra resources for Han. There's a lot of really good stuff that this works against. It is supremely a sideboard card because you're not going to know if your opponent's going to be able to deal with this immediately in your first game. But if you know that this will neuter their deck and neuter their leader and their ability to be able to do anything with that leader, Brain Invaders coming in from the sideboard to the main board is an excellent choice and something that people should be looking at and not be discounting based upon its just basic stats, because it requires an answer. And if your opponent spends an answer on this, they're not spending an answer on the other things that you're doing that could win the game for you. Next up, we have, by way of unlimited FFG socials, a fantastic Sith unit coming out in aggression. Without any further ado, Count Dooku Fallen Jedi is here once again. 8 cost aggression villainy ground units, 6 power, 6 health, Force, Separatist, and Sith traits, exploit 2 and overwhelm, and when played, for each unit you exploited while playing this card, you may deal damage to an enemy unit equal to the power of the exploited unit. This is a rare, number 138 out of 257 in TWI. Count Dooku is a fantastic card. Absolutely incredible. You're not going to play him for 8. At most, you're going to want to play him for 6. A 6 cost 6/6 we know is pretty good, especially that it has overwhelm and this when played, because you are exploiting something to get it down to 6 cost. You're going to deal some damage. This is one of those cards that kind of changes on its head what exploit realistically means. If you've got a big unit that you know is going to die and you have the ability to play Dooku, exploit that unit because you know it's going to go away at some point in time in the very near future anyway, and be able to use that damage to knock out one of your opponent's units. It doesn't say ground unit, it just says enemy unit. So you can knock out one of their space units with a big thing like, let's say, Gore, dealing a ton of damage after it's already done its work, overwhelming into other units. And then Dooku comes down and can also overwhelm into other units. So there's a lot of interesting stuff that's associated with Dooku himself. Exploit 2 means you can bring him out for 4. And if you're just exploiting droids, sure, you ping 2 damage, but you've also just put a 6/6 overwhelm on the board for 4. And that's also really good. Aggression has a lot of really good exploit tools that are not necessarily designed to bring out more troops. It's just designed to bring out highly overstated units for the price that you're paying for them. I think it's a 5/6 or a 6/5 squadron of vultures in space for 0 by just exploiting 3 units. That's super easy. You can drop the battle droid escort on 3 and then Dooku on 4, and your opponent's going to have a tough time clearing that off the board. And you're still able to deal 2 damage in 1 damage each in separate packets based upon sacrificing 2 droid units. And then you still get another droid unit from that battle droid escort. This is the exploit key here. This exploit unit is very good, and all you have to do is exploit 1. But if you exploit 2, it's ogre. Late Saturday night, Late Night Gaming came through with a stream having some games between their team and Tyler Parrott after the Chicago PQ. Congrats to Loopy as part of Late Night Gaming for getting 2nd place at that event. We got a preview of a card from Tyler. Link in the description below to that video. Go check them out. Go check out Late Night Gaming. They're cool people. We have here Satine Kryze, Death Watch Lieutenant, a 2 cost aggression villainy ground unit. 2 power, 3 health, Mandalorian Trooper. While you control another Mandalorian unit, this unit gains Overwhelm and Saboteur. While you control another Trooper unit, this gains +1/+0. This is a rare, number 130 out of 257 in TWI. Aggression villainy for this version of Bo-Katan. It makes sense. This is when she was a heavy part of the Death Watch with Pre Vizsla at the head, and she was not acting very heroically, so she didn't really break off to become her own heroism person, or at least non-morality aggression aspected version of the character until after Maul had killed Vizsla and taken over Mandalore himself. This is a very interesting unit. It does have those Sabine stats, but does Sabine things in a different way rather than being able to ping a shield off immediately. with the damage and then deal damage to your opponent. You just ping it off with the Saboteur, overwhelm the opponent's unit, and you get the +1/+0. But you need other units in order to be able to do that. Lots of Mandalorians, lots of troopers. A Gar Saxon or a Prey Vizsla deck that's packing a bunch of Mandalorian troopers and or combination thereof is going to be able to utilize this effect. Otherwise, this is kind of just a generic 2/3 that hopes to get a trooper on board to make it a 3/3, which can be pretty common. So far, in terms of things that mix with this directly, Super Commando Squad is a Mandalorian trooper, and Death Watch Loyalist and Prey Vizsla are also Mandalorian troopers in this specific thing. And then also, the previous Bo-Katan Kryze that we got as a unit, the 2-cost double aggression, is also a Mandalorian trooper. House Cast Soldier, also a Mandalorian trooper. Clan Challengers, also a Mandalorian trooper. So there's definitely some ways you could stick Mandalorian troopers into your aggression, villainy, probably vigilance as well deck. Which this is a good baseline for an early game. You play it, you play your Mandalorian trooper next, boom, she gets the extra bonuses and is able to push through that damage that you would not be able to otherwise. I like this card a lot. I would love to see more Mandalorians like this, but I think we've pretty much exhausted Mandalorians until we get to another set that's going to have something that's focused on either the show or more towards the end of the Siege of Mandalore with all that stuff from the Clone Wars, or maybe even once again another representation of the Assault, the Heroes of Mandalore arc from Rebels. But great card, should be fun. Bada boom. So after all those previews are finished, we do have the full deck lists for each starter deck. I'm not going to go over every single choice because that would take at least 6 minutes, plus discussing specific things. We're going to go over what's in here in each of these decks that's very interesting, what you as a person should probably put into the deck, taking out whatever it is you choose to take out to make these decks better. And then choices maybe for where the leaders might be better or what leaders might be better in these shells. So without any further ado, we have Ahsoka Tano deck list and General Grievous deck list. Tano being aggression command, Topoka City being our command base, so red-green. General Grievous being our cunning command, yellow-green. General Grievous himself is cunning. Layer of Grievous is command, that's our second command base. For the Ahsoka Tano deck list, we are going to be getting the guaranteed 3 copies of the Stalwart, Anakin Skywalker, Captain Rex, and the Ahsoka's Padawan lightsaber. We are also having starter versions of the Patrolling V-Wing and Open Fire and Outflank. Those are not in the main set as a whole. They're specifically exclusive to the starter, so don't expect to be able to pull those in the set itself. For the Grievous deck, we are getting 3 copies of our Separatist Commando, Battle Droid Escort, Guardians, General's Guardian, and the Grievous's Wheel Bike, with inclusions of Tactical Advantage and Waylay as starter exclusive reprints, which are very good. Waylay in this deck just puts in a lot of work. Ultimately, I'm not going to say specifically what should be taken out, but I definitely am going to give you information on what should be added in for each of these decks. Soldier of the 501st should go up to a 3 of, that's a very good card. Echo, same thing, 3 of, very good card. Republic Tactical Officer and Admiral Yularin are probably 2 of the most important inclusions to bump up to 3 ofs to make sure that you have that extra attack with your Tactical Officer and the extra health with your Yularin. Batch Brothers, I believe, should go up to 3 of, because at least that gives you a 2/1 clone and then a 2/2 clone trooper token. Drop-in should go up to 3 because, again, 4 cost, 2 tokens, bada boom, you're in the room. Commander Cody can probably go up to 2. Synchronized Strike could probably go up to 2 as well, because you will have a bunch of extra stuff. But other than that, the amount of copies of cards in this deck is actually pretty decent. General Grievous, you absolutely right off the bat want to pump Poggle the Lesser and the Invisible Hand to 3 ofs each. I understand that those are rares, but they should be easy enough to pick up because there's going to be a lot of people opening packs. This is going to be a very popular set. Droid deployment should definitely go up to 3. Thankfully, the Battle Droid Escort is already at 3, but I would say pump in the Battle Droid Legion as well, because that'll give you an option of something you can exploit onto the board, get some extra damage out of with in later rounds, and then be able to pump more tokens out when it dies. On the doorstep, automatically should be pumped to a 3 of, because 3 Battle Droids ready for 4, very, very, very good. Hailfire Tank should probably also pump up to 3, just because that combo of Battle Droid Escort on your round 2 into Hailfire Tank on your round 3 is pretty good. Political Pressure also should be pumped up to 3, because discard a card at your random against your opponent or take 2 droids. That's pretty good. Waylay probably should be a 3, but if it's something you don't have access to, probably don't have to worry about that. So those are the improvements that I would make to the Ahsoka Tano and the Grievous decks specifically. In terms of what they're capable of, I think Tano is fine until we potentially see what the aggression, heroism, common leader is. We haven't seen what that is yet. That's probably going to happen next week, or it may have already happened as of airing of this video. But General Grievous, I think right off the bat, you just flip Grievous and his lair out and Dooku and a Cunning Base in, and that will make this deck so much better just right off the bat, because Dooku himself is good, his leader ability is good, his leader unit ability is good, and you still keep all of the stuff the same about the deck as is. So there it is. Fun stuff. These decks should be interesting to play. I think the Tano deck edges out the Grievous deck pretty much every time, but according to Ryan and Tyler, when the Grievous deck goes off, it goes off, and that should be interesting to see when it happens. And there you have it. That's everything you're going to get from this last week. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining me. I appreciate each and every one of you. Make sure to like and comment on this video. Let me know what your favorite preview you saw this week was. Let me know which of the starter decks you're interested in playing, whether that's Ahsoka Tano or Grievous, and what changes you might make to the starter to make it better for yourself. Subscribe to this Star Wars Unlimited channel for all of your Star Wars Unlimited needs. Once again, thank you for joining me, folks. I appreciate each and every one of you. And with that, I will see you in the stars.